expected. So hello everyone, I am Brianna Rossa, the Office and Events Coordinator for the Small Business Center. I just kind of would like to go through a few housekeeping rules. I just remind everyone to stay on mute, and if you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the chat and they will be answered by either Blair or Roger or Holly. So this is a webinar that's going to be about an hour and a half long. So this is essentially a lean business masterclass. So we're going to talk about businesses' processes, typical containing about 90% of the waste, and this will help you essentially bring your activities in a way to essentially give you essentially better valuable to your customers and staff as well. So I would like to introduce Roger and Holly Blair, and I think we're going to get started with Roger first.
Good, thanks, Brianna. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen here. So let me see if I can find something. There we go. Let me get that on. Okay. So welcome to our Lean Masterclass seminar. So I just want to tell you a little bit about, I've named this project called Quinte Lean, and I'll explain that in just a second. Oh, just hang on a second. Turn that off. Should have put that on mute already. All right, sorry. So I just want to start off a little bit of humor. This, as Brianna said, this is about process and how you can apply lean to your process. Sorry about that. All right, now it's not going to ring anymore. This is about how you can apply lean to your process and a little bit of Dilbert humor here. So talking about documented process or deadlines, and either one of them in this case are very relevant, and teamwork also went out the window. Turn that off. Excuse me just a second. Somebody doesn't want to take no for an answer. Anyhow, sorry about that. So who am I? I'm a civil engineer by training. I graduated quite a few years ago, worked for many years in the food industry. There we go. I was a former plant manager of the old Lipton plant, which is now the sugar plant there in Red Pass Sugar on University Avenue. I was also the plant manager up in Peterborough at the Ragu plant. Focused on a lot of culture change and employee empowerment. An example of culture change is that when I first started in Belleville, we were getting 5 or 6 lost time accidents a year. And people just took that for granted, We eventually got by being able to change the culture of people's thinking about safety and how it impacts them and their lives and their own families. We got down to 3 years in a row with 0 accidents, and that was a huge change. Took a few years to get there, but it can be done just by changing the thinking of the way people think. I'm a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. TPM facilitator. I like to ski and watch car racing on F1 car racing, and go to Montreal and see them once every few years. Also an amateur photographer. I've been married 42 years. I have 2 daughters. One of them's on the call here today, our oldest daughter, Holly. And I've been in Belleville since, and have one new grandson from the second daughter. He's 16, 17 months old now, just learning to walk. So he's a hoot. I've resided, my wife and I have lived in Belleville since 1995. We love it here. I think it's the best place in Ontario to live. So why I wanted to do this is, and I'm calling this a Quinte Lean project. I'm taking a leadership and development course through Landmark Worldwide, and the intention here of that leadership course is we have to do a community project. So the project I came up with was Lean is a great concept, and a lot of people think it's really difficult. And the Six Sigma part of it can be, and Holly will explain a little bit more about that when she gets to it. But the Lean concepts and tools, the beauty about them is they're open. You can search to Google. They're not copyrighted. You can apply them to anything. So the intention here is to introduce these Lean concepts, especially to small businesses and entrepreneurs. I mean, we've all been hit hard by the pandemic. You know, I was in my business once I left the corporate world 10 years ago. I started my own business. I worked mostly out of town, did a lot of traveling. The past 3 or 4 years, I was working in Chicago until March 21st this year, when my last flight, they said, no, you can't come. And I haven't been to Chicago since. And of course, I can't do any work for that client. And so the pandemic really impacted my business. And I started getting into the Lean stuff. How can I apply this to my own business? And I thought this would be a great project if we can introduce just how easy it is to use Lean and apply them to your business, no matter how big or how small it is. So Holly and I are going to be putting on a series of 5 to 6 Lean webinars geared towards small businesses. The focus will be on how to apply these Lean concepts and tools to your business, whether you have 1 employee, 10 or 100 employees. And I want to thank Brianna and Luke for agreeing to sponsor this first one for us. I'm not sure that we can convince them to sponsor the rest yet, but we'll be working on that. So I'll give you a little bit of history about Lean, because it originated in Japan at Toyota. So in 1913, everybody knows the story of Henry Ford and how he invented the production line. And that was a huge step forward for manufacturing. A car that used to take 12 hours to build could now be built in an hour and a half just by applying Henry Ford's model. Of course, he had some restrictions to that, of course, because we've all heard the line, well, I'll bid you a Model T, whatever color you want, as long as it's black, right? So there wasn't much variety, but he did apply the principles of the assembly line. So after the 1930s, a couple of guys, Mr. Toyota and Mr. Ono, others at Toyota, started looking at the manufacturing industry. And especially after World War II, when Japan started to rebuild, they really wanted to make some improvements over what was the norm by then that Henry Ford had did it. So they started looking at how could they improve the existing manufacturing processes, make it possible to provide better process flow and also over a wider variety of product offerings. So there's no doubt that Lean originated in manufacturing, but it's evolved. So they revisited Ford's original model. They called it the Toyota production system. And that shifted the focus from machines and utilizing machines to their maximum to looking at the flow of the product through the whole process, and more of a process focus than machine. So in anybody's business, large or small, so there are generally 3 types of business processes, regardless how big or small. We all have to do all of them. The first one is what they call management processes. So that includes your organizing, controlling, what's your strategy, how many meetings do I have, and who's my board of directors, who's my mentors, who's my advisors. Organizing your business and getting it structured. There's the operational ones, of course. How do you generate leads? How do I generate sales? I got to get purchase orders. I got to fulfill those orders. Maybe I have to ship. I can look after customer service. The day-to-day operation of your business. That applies to all of us. And then, of course, the supporting processes that goes along with your business. Hiring people, IT, computer, website. If you have employees, you got to look after their safety. If you have an office, you got to clean the office. Somebody has to do the books. All of those supporting businesses. Those are the 3 main types of business processes. So the hint here is that we want to look at business processes, and lean can be applied to any process. It's not just for manufacturing. It was started there and does a good job in manufacturing, but you can apply it to any process. And there's a lot of belief out there when people hear lean and Six Sigma that it's only for manufacturing, but it's not. So think of a process as simply a recipe. If you make some tweaks to that recipe, you can sometimes get better, far superior results. And not sometimes, but most of the time. Think of a recipe for butter tarts. We can all go online and get a recipe and download a recipe for making butter tarts. We can, and we're all doing a lot of baking this past summer, and myself included. Not so much baking, but I've been doing a lot of cooking when I've been at home. But I've learned that just rediscovered my love for cooking over the summer. So, but if you download that recipe of butter tarts, you can make the butter tarts, okay, and they might be okay, but then there's grandma's butter tarts, right? She made the best ones and had the best secret recipe. So if you can apply grandma's recipe to your butter tarts, you get a far superior result. Same thinking about your process. There are two really pillars of value, and that top bar there as customer value, because that, as a small business, that's what we're all about. And it's about respecting people is the main pillar, and continuous improvement of your processes is the other pillar. So people always come first. That's the first and foremost rule of lean principles. By listening and investing in them, they're more likely to deliver better results, and they're also more likely to put your customers first. By putting people first, you improve your relationship in the community, with others, with your vendors, with your customers, and even your competitors. When you're looking at continually improving, you always got to look at your business activities and where they add value. Do they really add value to your customer? Define your business processes and workflow. Map them out, understand what they are and what doing to support your business. And finally, eliminate waste and always strive to continually improve. So think of lean thinking is equal to customer value, because that's what lean is really about. It's about your customer. What's of value to your customer? To put this simply, any step that does not add value to your customer in any way should be eliminated. If you're doing something that doesn't add customer value, then you got to really look at why you're doing it. And lean thinking will discover those hidden wastes that you all take for granted, myself included, and let you look at other ways to eliminate them. And just some typical examples. Holly's going to cover a lot of the wastes generated by lean and discovered, but one of them, a simple one, is over processing. You're doing extra work that you don't need to do. So entering the same data in more than one place, on a spreadsheet or in a software or on a form. Multiple levels of approval for a small spending request. You know, I worked in a lot of corporations where if you want a purchase order, you got to get it approved by 3 people before you can buy anything, right? Ordering unnecessary tests for patients if your doctor's office, tests that aren't needed, that don't necessarily. Extra reports. You know, a good example of this is people do reports. They start a report, somebody asks them to do a report, they do it every week, and they continue doing it for years and years until they realize nobody is even looking at it, but it's part of their routine, and they just generate that report. And finally, the last one is practical for those with young kids. Cutting the crust off your kids' sandwiches when they like it, but they really don't need to cut off anymore because they can still eat them with them on. The last slide is just thinking from a lean process. An optimist thinks the glass is half full. The pessimist thinks it's half empty. But the lean thinker says, why is the glass twice as big as it should be? Why don't we just get the right size glass? So, as I said, I'm planning a series of these webinars, probably one every month for the next 5 to 6 months. The next one is tentatively planned for March 23rd, and the topic is going to be about process thinking, more second next step and along these lines that Holly's going to give us in the introduction to Lean today. There's my contact information. I'll introduce Holly, who's also, I said earlier, is also my oldest daughter. And she's going to give the next part of the presentation, which will focus on what is Lean. And also at the end, I think there's going to be some tools that you can get from Brianna or download along with the recording of the video. So over to you, Holly. I'll stop my share and you can take it away.
All right. So can you guys see my screen all right? Yes?
Yes, I can see it, Holly.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Dad. And welcome, everyone. My name's Holly Blair. I'm located in Calgary, Alberta. I did move away from Belleville, but I didn't go too, I don't stay away too long. I come home every 2 or 3 times a year. And this is I run a company called Engineering Possibilities, and this is a Lean Masterclass that I offer for my clients. So today you'll get a sneak peek here into 5 simple steps to free your business from the 8 deadly wastes and instantly save money. So if you somehow live under a rock and you haven't noticed, there's a global pandemic and it really disrupted life as we knew it. And getting through those first few weeks, which is nearly a year ago now, feels like a lifetime ago. But what it actually gave us and what I came to discover was the real opportunity that the pandemic is. For businesses of all sizes to get the chance to pivot, figure out what to do sometimes as it's happening. And it really highlighted aspects of our society and our businesses that weren't working. So some of the gaps identified in our healthcare systems, in long-term care, and now figuring out how to get vaccines out to the entire population. Like a real global economic downturn happened, unprecedented. I know many of you likely received, like as I have, business support funding from the government, which I thought I would never qualify for until all of this started to happen. It really challenged us with how we do business and the models we used to use about in-person services and gatherings in large numbers. And implementing and creating work from home programs seemingly overnight, coming up with delivery services. And it really forced our attention to the uncertainty of life. And it had always been uncertain. However, there was an illusion that it wasn't. So if you can take the case that the global pandemic has really been an opportunity, it starts to open up a space for you to be able to create something in the face of those circumstances. So what I'm going to cover today, I'm going to cover 3 common symptoms of process problems. So listen here for where your business gets impacted by these problems and look at how you've been responding to them and what maybe you could do differently. Then I'll cover the 8 deadly wastes and how to find them in your business and then what to do about them once you see them. Then we'll have 5 simple steps to free your business from those problems. And then I'll quickly highlight an opportunity to work with myself and Dad to look at how you can implement Lean. So how to get the most value from today. So first, you want to listen from a real issue in your business. So something you're currently dealing with could be an existing problem in an existing business process. It might be a new challenge that you're dealing with as a result of the pandemic. And it really ultimately should be something that you are open to seeing something new about. And the promise of the Lean Masterclass today is that you will leave this webinar with new actions to elevate the performance of your business operations that you can put into practice immediately. So before we go too much farther, I'll give you a quick introduction about myself and what has me leading the Lean Masterclass and what had me create my business in the first place. So I'm a chemical engineer with now, I guess, 14 years of experience in chemical processing, manufacturing, project management, healthcare. I went to Queens down the road there from Belleville in Kingston, and I graduated in 2007 and then moved out west where there was lots of job opportunities at the time. And then I created Engineering Possibilities about 3 years ago with the intention of really making a difference for smaller organizations with process transformation. And I learned about Lean Six Sigma in the corporate world, and I saw a real opportunity to make a difference with it and bring the conversation to small businesses and other entrepreneurs. Because the conversation for people like you is maybe like, it could often exist as something that doesn't apply to me, or you have to have a degree in engineering to understand it, which I do have, but is not required. Lean is very simple. And it just might be something you've never considered before. So I wanted to make that available to other, bring that conversation to other avenues. So I have a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, which is a fancy way of saying that I know a lot about making processes flow quickly and easily. And then I also know how to do all that complicated statistics stuff, which I usually just take care of on the side for my clients and focus more on the lean side because it's way more practical. I'm a certified change management practitioner and an executive coach. And like Dad, I love skiing and Formula One, and I have a 1.5-year-old puppy named Lucas. So let's get in here to what is Lean Six Sigma. So Lean Six Sigma is a process methodology, improvement methodology that's designed to reduce variation in process and eliminate waste. So the Six Sigma part is about reducing variation so that you can make the same thing the same way come out of the end of your process. And the eliminating waste part is about streamlining and making things effective. So Lean Six Sigma together is a set of tools and really a structured way of thinking and solving problems that improves overall process efficiency and effectiveness. And as Dad shared in his set of slides, it originated in Japan after World War II and the rise of the Japanese auto industry, primarily with Toyota. And while it did originate in manufacturing, it's got applications across many industries. So including healthcare, service businesses, chemical processing, food and beverage, hospitality, even as small as one-person consulting firms I've actually worked with. So what are some common symptoms of process problems? How do you know when you might need to apply Lean Six Sigma? So the first one's running fast and going nowhere, firefighting, and then looking for improvements in all the wrong places. So I'm going to speak to each one. So running fast and going nowhere. This is where you've got the experience of being stuck on the hamster wheel trying to run your business. And actually, at times can feel like your business is running you instead of the other way around. And as human beings, we often think that the way to get more done is to figure out how to do more faster. And when you get into this world, you can often get distracted by what's immediately in front of you instead of some of those more like Q2 second quartile activities of more proactive activities like marketing and planning and strategic planning and everything that goes with that. But when you're running a shop and you're the only one there, when the customer comes in, you're probably going to drop what you're doing and go deal with what they're asking for. So this running fast and going nowhere is a common symptom with small businesses because you're actually trying to get everything done yourself, and you can forget that you need to put some focus onto business development, marketing, and planning. The second symptom is called firefighting. Now, I hope that most of you never have a workday that looks exactly like this, but I love this photo because it's so dramatic. And firefighting is a very tricky problem because it actually looks good to be the one person who saves the day. But what you end up doing is you survive from one problem to the next. So something goes wrong, the one person who knows how to do it, often the business owner, ends up trying to solve the problem. They get distracted from what they're supposed to be doing or what they could be doing to go deal with the next problem. And when this gets really bad, you go from one disaster to the next, constantly trying to pick up the pieces and keep it all together. And this can be a problem when you rely on a single resource to manage your operations. whether that's yourself as the business owner or that one guy, Joe, who knows how everything works. And what happens one day when Joe stops coming to work? Then the third symptom is called looking for improvements in all the wrong places. And this one is the most common of the three. So human beings, we like to fix things. If you haven't noticed, when you see a problem, aren't you naturally drawn to try to fix it? Like you come up with solutions and you implement them and you try to figure out how to make it not happen anymore. But when we get into that, there's nothing wrong with trying to fix. What we don't always see is what is past what's immediately obvious to us. So we'll see a problem in our business process, and then we'll try to improve it by making the business process run faster, by hiring more resources, or figuring out how we can automate the whole thing. And sometimes this is when we react and we apply band-aid solutions to a problem that happens. And we do that so quickly, we don't actually look for the real source of the problems. What's actually behind the systemic issues that if you have fixed that or addressed that concern, that none of these other problems would ever have the opportunity to happen. So this one's sort of akin to the old adage of looking for your keys where the light is instead of where you dropped them. So I've got some examples here of what's possible with lean process transformation. So the first one was for a large corporation, and it's a fertilizer manufacturing company. And we were making urea. Urea, if you don't know, it's the little white pellets in the bag of fertilizer that you buy at Home Depot. And you make urea by combining carbon dioxide and ammonia at really high temperatures and pressures. And then you spray it into these granulator drums. It's a liquid, and then as it moves through the granulator, it dries out, and you get the little pellet that comes out you find in your bag of fertilizer. And by applying some really simple lean techniques about organizing systems and coordinating the preventative maintenance actions for these 5 pieces of equipment, we figured out a way to make an entire extra month of production over the course of a summer by dealing with the days when we otherwise had to cut rate because of high temperatures. We also reduced the granulator downtime by nearly 50%, and it resulted in nearly $11 million in additional revenue. And that project was when I first fell in love with lean. And from here, I started to take it to other applications. Another application, lean is really big in the healthcare industry as well. I've actually even seen some job postings in the Quinte health region for lean. And so I'm sure that this already exists in that space. And I know there's lots of applications even in doctors' offices and other clinics. So there's the patient length of stay in the endoscopy unit. South Health Campus is a large hospital in Southeast Calgary. It was built probably about almost 10 years ago now. And I did a project there looking at the flow of patients through that unit. I spent 3 or 4 days just sitting there in the unit watching the process and noticed how there was always confusion around which patient was going from which bed into which procedure room and then back to which bed, and then who's where and what part of the process are they in. So by streamlining the flow and coordinating where the patients actually were located, and we made a Kanban system to actually say what part of the process they were in, we figured out how to reduce the length of stay by 25%. They used to be in there for about 2.5 hours for about a 45-minute procedure. We got that down to about 1.5 hours. In that simple action, it actually freed up enough capacity that we could serve about 500 more patients in that clinic every year, which made a big difference because at the time there was a wait list of about 4,500 to get through that process. And then the final example, this one's an HR consulting company. This was like a one-woman operation. And we looked at how she was doing client intake and how her proposal systems was working. So by simply streamlining how she went after new clients and then brought them on board into her business, we removed waste in that process and streamlined it by 63%. And we also saved nearly a week of time with creating a new proposal system. So my point here is that Lean's got applications way beyond manufacturing. And if you've got a simple mom and pop shop, or you're working in a manufacturing setting, whatever it is, there are applications for Lean. So I'll introduce you now to one of the core Lean concepts. It's called the 8 deadly wastes. And they conveniently form this acronym called downtime. So downtime stands for defects, overproduction, waiting, non-utilized talent, transportation, inventory, motion, and excess processing. And we're going to go through each of them today and look for, this is where you want to have that example I talked about at the beginning of where you can see this applies in your own business. So first off, what is waste? So any business process has a series of activities in it. And when you're looking for waste, you first want to classify each of the process steps as being value added or non-value added. Now, value added activities have a specific definition. And these are activities that change the fit, form, or function of the person or the thing that's moving through your process. And they should also be anything the customer is willing to pay for. And then non-value added activities are basically everything else. Things that consume time and resources, but they don't satisfy your customer demands and requirements. So, and the tricky part here is that business processes typically contain about 90% waste. And that applies across all industries and all applications. Typically, there's only 5 to 10% of the actual activities in a process that actually add value. So why do we focus on waste, and how does this apply? So we'll take an example here. So let's say you've got a process, it's got the 90-10 split of waste and value, and the cycle time, which is how long the process actually takes, say it's 100 minutes long. Now, if you go after it and you don't know about waste, so you just see the actual actions there are in a process. So you go after trying to improve that. So say you're running a doctor's office and you see 3 patients an hour. So you have 20-minute appointments and 3 patients every hour. Now, what if you went to 15-minute appointments and you could see 4 patients an hour? That would be better, right? Well, you'd have to figure out how you were going to streamline that, how you were going to manage that extra patient every hour and those like 7, 8 more every day. That's a lot of extra work. And so you put that effort into improving your 10% value added activities. But when you do that, say you did, and it can take a lot of effort to improve your value added activities. But in reality, what happens is that you've only reduced your value by 50%. You've actually cut down on the part that the patients liked, or your customers liked. So instead of 20 minutes with the physician, they only get 15 minutes. And that extra 5 actually decreases the value that they get. And you might see more people, but if you look at it from the customer's perspective, or in this case, your patient, which is what Lean is all about, you're not actually adding value to them. And the outcome here is that you've only knocked your cycle time down by 5%. So your process cycle time's only gone down to 95 minutes instead of 100 minutes. On the flip side, if you take that same process with the 90-10 split and 100 minutes long, and this time you go after all the non-value added activities, all the stuff that gets in the way of you providing value to your customers. So with the same doctor's office example, how to streamline the amount of time and reduce the amount of time that your patients are waiting for you, how to get their records available to the doctor right away on command, how to make sure that they've got their weight and their blood pressure and whatever they need for their appointment taken care of before they see the physician. So if you go after all these non-value added activities, the stuff that gets in the way that you don't immediately see, if you go after that, now you've made a real improvement. So you've reduced your 90% waste down to 45 because you've cut it in half. And now your process cycle time, let's say it's now 55 minutes, and you've made a 45% reduction overall. Now we're talking. So For these next few slides, I've got each of the examples of what lean waste is, and then how to go find it in your process. So for this one, this is where you really want to have that area of your business in mind. So defects are issues and errors that arise from poor quality process inputs and outputs. So examples of defects waste can include manufacturing errors, having deliveries that are late to your customers, missing customer information that you have to keep going back and asking them for, or look up in your system, or just having general process errors and mistakes. Defect errors typically arise from having poor work practices or maybe just undefined procedures. Supplier quality issues can contribute, having incomplete information, or simply just processes that aren't capable of actually producing what you're creating. Overproduction, Dad mentioned this one. So overproduction is defined as producing more than what your customer actually needs. And examples of this waste are having unfilled client appointment slots, mass production that's not related to customer demand. So just because your machine can run at 100% capacity doesn't mean that it should. And preparing extra reports that sometimes people don't read. Sources of overproduction waste can include inventory issues, quality supplier issues. They're having variable demand that changes over the year and not having your production rates match them, or just having inefficient processes. W is for waiting, and this one is the most common and most easily recognized. And I assert that most people have some aspect of waiting involved in their processes. So waiting is defined as waiting to execute the next process step, having process delays, waiting for inputs. So examples of waiting waste are batch processing activities where you have to change over to another product line, and the downtime while you're waiting to restart. Having customers waiting for your service. So all of those waiting rooms, as fun as they are, they're not value added. Waiting for upstream process steps to complete, or waiting for materials to become available. Sources of waiting waste are physical layouts of your process that don't work, having ineffective scheduling practices, inconsistent supply issues, or just unbalanced workloads. N is for non-utilized talent, and this one is a very interesting one because it involves the underutilization of your workers' knowledge and skills, stifled creativity, and lack of opportunities to contribute improvement ideas. So examples here are when business owners end up doing the bookkeeping, or when we used to say, when I worked for Alberta Health Services for a few years, when the physicians were doing paperwork or searching for materials they need. Having stifled employee creativity and contribution opportunities, or just having untrained staff who end up working with your clients directly. And sources of this kind of waste are lack of training for staff, or just insufficient training, workplace cultures that have blame and fault. People are not very willing to contribute improvement ideas, and even if they see them, when they're worried about if they say something, they'll get in trouble. Lack of process documentation also contributes to non-utilized talent, as well as excessive rules and complex procedures. The next one's called transportation. And this is the unnecessary movement and transportation of products, materials, and equipment. Examples of transportation waste include excessive handoffs and processes, moving equipment around just for the sake of it, and excessive physical distances between parts of your process. And sources of transportation waste include ineffective physical process layouts, lack of organization in your workplace, or sometimes your work just spans multiple locations. And in that case, transportation waste is something that you wouldn't necessarily eliminate, but you look to minimize it and design maybe a delivery route that's the most effective and efficient method of delivering your goods. Inventory. This one includes an excess of accumulation of materials, products, or work in progress that are beyond what your customer actually needs. And inventory can be a real insidious kind of waste. And insidious means that it's like pervasive and all over. It's a nasty one because it actually hides other problems. So if you have high inventory, you'll be able to cover up the source of other problems. So you can see that there's missing things in terms of your inventory control system. It can hide your overproduction issues, or it can hide quality problems. So inventory is tricky because you need to have enough, but also not too much of everything. So some examples here are having an accumulation of raw materials, ineffective inventory systems, even just having an excessive amount of unread emails present in your inbox can be a source of inventory waste. Having large work in progress inventory levels, so that can be very, very expensive. And inventory levels that are too low. It's also a problem because you don't have what you need when you need it. And then sources of inventory waste would be lack of inventory controls, long processing and lead times, unbalanced workloads, and having product delivery delays. The next one's called motion. The motion is defined as an excess movement of people in the process or having inefficient workstations. So you want to note that motion and transportation are distinct from one another. Transportation waste is about the movement of equipment and materials in your process, and motion is focused on the people who are in your process and what they're doing, what they're moving around. So examples of motion waste include having excess process steps, having unnecessary analysis or testing. So sometimes things fail once, so we implement some kind of inspection process. But if we could figure out how we made it correctly the first time, we wouldn't have to do an inspection at the end. Also, cluttered workspaces, or my favorite, staff searching for tools. If I could just calculate how much time people waste looking for the materials they need, it would be excessive. And when I do that for business owners, they are shocked by how much downtime that their operations staff actually spend searching for what they need. And then sources of motion waste, where this stuff comes from. It comes as a result of having unbalanced workloads, a lack of organization in their workspace, lack of cell design processes and practices. So having a layout that's all over the place and you have to move around a lot versus having everything you need in one space. And then just ineffective physical layouts of their process. The last of the 8 waste is called excess processing. And this is the unnecessary or redundant activities and processes that are present in the businesses. So examples of excess process waste are dealing with manufacturing errors. You actually have to go off and redesign or recomplete that work to correct the manufacturing error. Late deliveries, you then have to call the customer and apologize and figure out how you're going to get it to them and send more emails and send more communications. Having missing customer information, having to go look that information up, and having process errors and mistakes. Sources of excess processing waste, where these ones come from, having long setup and changeover times, lack of training, inconsistent process performance measures and metrics, and lack of workplace organization. So that's the 8 wastes. I know it can be a lot of information in a short period of time. And at the end, I'm gonna include a link to a worksheet that has a definition of all of these wastes for you. I'll also include a copy of my slide deck. So we have 5 simple steps now to free your business from these 8 deadly wastes. So the first step is to, 1, just identify the waste that's in your process. Then create a plan, execute the plan, see what happened, review the results, and repeat. So I'll step through each of these processes. So first, you want to identify waste. You can use the downtime acronym to help you remember the 8 wastes. And this image here on the screen is a picture of the worksheet that I'm going to be sending you. So this enables you to take this sheet out. You can print it. It goes nicely on 8.5 by 11. It's got each of the 8 wastes here It's got a definition of the 8 wastes, and then it has some instructions for how to go use it on your shop floor or your shop or your whatever your business looks like. And then it's got a column to record your process observations, so the waste you actually see, and then what action you can take to improve that. So you want to make sure that you're quantifying the impact of your waste, getting the costs, the resources, time, and productivity. We call this a waste walk. So you actually would print off one of these sheets and then go for a walk around your business, whether that's an office or a shop floor, or maybe it's a yard site, something outside, and you would go around and actually look at what's happening and start to identify the waste in the process. And then, since you're a human being who likes to fix things, you'll come up with lots of actions to improve them right away. And then once you've got all your actions, you want to create your plan. So this is the actions that you would have that you see how you would eliminate and reduce waste in your process. So you want to align your actions with specific waste reduction efforts, so you can make sure that you're actually going to deliver on solutions that will make an impact overall. And you can use this thing called an impact effort matrix to focus your actions. It's a really simple tool. You can draw it out on a piece of paper. So you basically estimate that how much effort an action is meant to take, or you think would take to execute. You put that on the vertical axis or the y-axis. And then the impact. How big of a impact is this going to make in your business? So how much of a difference will it make? Put that on the bottom, on the x-axis. And then I make up a scale of usually a ranking system of 1 to 10. And then I plot my ideas on sticky notes or just draw them out on a piece of paper on this matrix. Then if you divide the matrix right at the 5 mark, so everything above 5 is either a don't do now or a major project, and everything below is a quick win or gem for the effort side. And then once you see that, you can figure out what's the plan of attack here that's going to give me the biggest bang for my buck. So typically you'd want to go after the gems first, the high impact, low effort activities. Then you might touch on a few of the more major projects and get into the quick wins. And then the stuff that ends up in the top left corner, the don't do now box, that's kind of your ideas that would sit on the back burner. They might be really good ideas, but you just don't have the resources, or it doesn't make strategic sense to execute those actions right now. But maybe after you execute a bunch of your gems, quick wins, and a few major projects, that maybe some of those don't do now ideas start to shift over into other sections of the matrix. So this can be a really handy little tool. It's very simple to use, and it can be very effective in ensuring that you're going after the biggest, the things that'll give you the biggest bang for your buck. Step 3 is execute your plan. So taking a page out of Nike's book, just go do it. Like, go try it. Don't have to make it perfect. Just go take an action. See what happens. And then review your results. So what actually happened? Get to the source of what worked and what didn't work, because there'll always be both in whatever action you take. And then you can refine your plan and figure out how you could do it better next time, or expand your pilot process out to something bigger. You want to make sure here that you're measuring the outcomes with respect to savings, cost, resources, time, and productivity. And then go do it again because your process changed. So go back, look again, identify more ways to create a plan and execute your waste reduction actions. If you keep doing this over time, like even inside of a week or a month, you'll start to free up some of your time, free up some of your resources, and be much more effective in your business. Now, when you start to do this, you can quickly have the experience that you've now opened up a can of worms. So this idea of waste and transforming your business processes to be highly effective, it's a new kind of a lens, like a pair of glasses you put on that you can view your business through. And when you start to identify the waste, you can start to see that this might be the tip of the iceberg for what's really possible in your business. And you might actually start to find more problems before you find solutions for them. And that's okay. In fact, it's really useful because now you're actually got your attention on reducing your waste and making your business more profitable and more effective. So the more problems you find, you could actually frame those as opportunities and go after them with excitement and vigor and with a real commitment to transform your process and have your business be really effective, very profitable, and efficient. So from here, there's lots of lean process transformation tools that you can use to identify your improvement actions. There's lots of them listed here. If anyone has any questions about those, I'm happy to answer them as well. And again, as Dad said, one of my favorite things about Lean Six Sigma is that all of these tools are publicly available. If you just go Google it, you can find a lot of resources on how to do it. And then finally, we've got some free downloads for you. So following the Lean Masterclass, I'm actually going to send these to Brianna. So she'll use Brianna and the Small Business Center to facilitate sending these out to you all. But you'll get the 8 waste guide and the waste walk worksheet as well, as along with a copy of the slides I presented today. And then from there, if you're interested in working with Lean, with engineering possibilities between myself and Dad, we offer Lean business assessments, like a program specifically for entrepreneurs, training and workshops, coaching programs. And I know I'm in Calgary, and I do intend to work with Dad in Ontario. So we're working on a couple of initiatives out there now. So don't feel like I'm too far away to ask. I definitely don't mind flying home to work with some clients and spend some time in the Quinte area with my family. So that's everything I have today. So I'll stop sharing and turn it back over to you, Dad.
Yeah, so if anyone has any questions for either Holly or myself, we'll be pleased to answer them. We're done early, so I know everyone's busy, so that's always a good thing to be done early. We now have a free half hour, but if anybody has any questions on a specific example you have in your business right now, we'd be happy to hear them, or on any more requests for more information or whatever. No.
This is your chance, everyone, to ask a few questions. If not, I can send you their information. So if you don't wish to essentially share with others some questions that you do have, you will have their email and their phone number, as well as a link to their website as well.
Oh, here's some of the question from me. What happens when you're a nonprofit and money is a factor in some of these deadly wastes? Example, adequate staff. So you're absolutely right. I mean, a lot of nonprofits are, just trying to keep their head above water. They're relying on donations. They're relying on volunteers. Great question. But I'll see if I can answer first, and then I'll turn over to Holly. But the answer is, if you can just take one thing, one of those gems and one of those quick wins, and figure out how to save time or even money, and that'll allow you to devote your time to other problems. That's where I would start. Holly?
Yeah, that's good, Dad. And Megan, to address your question, a lot of times those low effort, high impact activities, those gems or those quick wins that I shared in the matrix, a lot of times they don't require a lot of financial investment. They can be really simple changes that make a big difference. One example that comes to mind, it's not a nonprofit, but this action costs $0. So I'm going to share it with you. I led a Lean Masterclass just like this to a colleague of mine who was a nurse in a unit in Foothills Hospital in Calgary. And it's the post-anesthetic care unit. So it's where the patients go after they've had a major surgery. And she took my masterclass and then noticed that when she went back to work, that the nurses were leaving their patients and going down the hall around the corner into the supply room to get what they needed, and then bringing that supply back down the hall around the corner back to the patient. And it was taking an extra 20 or 30 seconds. Not a huge amount of time, but when you consider those condition their patients are in, they may not have that time, and our nurse might want to be a little bit closer to those patients. So what she did was she went over to the supplier room, noticed the main cart that they got the supplies from was actually on wheels. She unlocked the wheels, pushed the cart into the middle of their unit, and left it there. And that simple action cost her nothing. Just having as something that was really logical and really saved time and empowered what the nurses were up to.
Yeah.
Really made a difference. So without knowing your specific situation, Megan, I can't quite comment on where I could see applications for you. But consider that it doesn't have to require a large financial investment or anything. And when you're a nonprofit, the more you can get back to aligning to what you're actually there to create and what difference you're there to make for the people you're serving, the better off you are.
Yeah, so that's a great example of just getting organized and of the principle SMED, single minute of exchange of dies. You know, there's a good example of in car racing where in NASCAR, or they used, if you watch old videos of doing a pit stop in Formula One racing, it used to take 6 minutes to change the tires or put gas in the car and clean the driver's visor, windshield, and by the time he would get out of the car. Now they change 4 tires. They don't put gas anymore, but they actually change 4 tires on an F1 car during a race. I think the record is 1.8 seconds to change 4 tires on a car. Yes, that's just an example of getting training and organizing. Yeah.
Okay, great. Any other questions from anyone? That was great, Megan. Thank you. Feel free to come off mute and ask a question, or you're welcome to drop it in the chat.